and Dave the Confused. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get it started. Some of the creepiest places in the world are forests. Now, don't get me wrong, the forest in the middle of nature can be one of the most beautiful places you've ever been. It's the home to many an animal and insects and plants. It's just a whole habitat for the environment that is just overall an amazing place to be sometimes. Peaceful, tranquil. The forest can be amazing, but it could also be a place of just pure nightmare. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And just before we get into it, I just want to remind everybody that we have merch at teespring.com. Look up Dave the Confused, Confused Army. The link is in the description. Please go check out what we have there. We have sales, we have shirts and whatever that aren't going to last long, so go check them out ASAP. Now, I used to live kind of deep in the bush area when I was growing up. We were surrounded by trees and forests and stuff like that, always. And I remember seeing things like coyotes, wolves. We saw a bear once, deer, things like that. And none of that really scares me because I know if I respect their boundaries, 99% of the time they're not going to come into my boundaries, right? And that's a pretty smart way to be. Especially with bears. Just leave them alone. Leave the bears alone. This video is now a public service announcement. Just saying, leave the bears alone. But other things other than animals sometimes live in forests. One of the biggest urban legends from a forest background is the Blair Witch. What really brought the Blair Witch into the limelight for everybody was the original movie done by 3 teenagers in the way of a documentary style horror movie. I think this was at least one of the first movies of this type that nobody had seen before. And it was so realistic and so crazy that those 3 teenagers had to go on live television to tell people, we're okay. It was fake. The whole thing was fake. But the legend of the Blair Witch is based on a real urban legend of a witch that did live in the forest that would kidnap children and essentially kill these kids. There's a lot of stories and rumors about who the Blair Witch actually was. Was it a human being that had gone to a really dark place and taken themselves out of society to live in the forest and to go on with these evil, sinister plans of kidnapping children and torturing them and eating them and killing them and leaving their bones on display? Or was it something more than that? Was the Blair Witch something beyond human? Something beyond reality? Was it something that maybe our minds can't even comprehend right now? And us as humans, we've evolved from burning witches at the stake. But witches in forests have been a mainstay of terror and nightmares for as long as literacy's been around. Remember Hansel and Gretel? They find the house made of candy in the middle of the forest, and it's a witch that eats kids. The similarities of what was a book for children, essentially, to urban legends is really strange. And witches that were caught red-handed kidnapping children, or they found deceased children or bones or whatever within the dwellings of witches, they would burn these women at the stake, and they used to say that the witches would stare right into the eyes of the parents while they burned. And some of these witches wouldn't even scream when their bodies were engulfed in flames. Just the idea of that may have once existed makes me not want to go near a forest anymore. The other thing we can talk about with forests is the famous forest in Japan, the suicide forest. This forest has so many legends about it, and the amount of physical evidence that has been found in this forest is uncanny and terrifying. This forest is known as a place where, when people get to the point in their lives where they are thinking about suicide, they go to this forest to do it. They essentially walk into this forest knowing that most likely they will not come out. And as I'm sure a lot of you know from just being part of YouTube for the last several years, or you know, being an avid horror movie watcher or anything, that they've found so much just unspeakable acts done in this forest. They have found bodies, they have found pieces of bodies, they have found guns and knives and nooses that they believe were the instruments of suicide, yet their bodies are gone. There's so many stories about this forest that I couldn't even begin to get into that. That's a whole nother video. And it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts what happens inside this forest. If you're interested, I would say just go and Google stories from the suicide forest and watch what comes up. But keep in mind, these stories will keep you up at night. They will. And if you're easily scared or just don't have the temperament and the mindset right now to go over that stuff, don't. Because you'll see things and read things that will never leave your mind. At least it hasn't for me, since I've, done research about this forest. There are other places in the world that are famous for being suicide spots as well. The Golden Gate Bridge is another one. And there's footage of people just walking politely down the bridge, and then all of a sudden they just stop, climb up on the rail, and jump. It's super upsetting, and really, I don't suggest looking any of that up. Just stick to the urban legends of the suicide forest, and we'll go from there. And last but not least, Slender Man. Now, there is so many crazy stories about Slender Man. And there's a video game, there's movies, it's the legend of Slender Man has blown up. Everybody knows about him now. But a lot of people may not know how that story began. And it's creepy as F. Creepy as fudge. Now again, because this is a real story, I'm not going to use the names of the families because I don't want to bring up any past history if they're at a point in their lives where they've gotten over that, right? But essentially, two teenage girls believed that they were talking to Slender Man. They would go visit him, they would bring him things that he asked for, and they were 100% enslaved to who they believed was Slender Man. One thing they did for their legend was they attempted to kill another girl as a sacrifice for Slender Man. What was done to her was absolutely horrific. They say that she was stabbed something like 25 times or 27 times or something. And that type of trauma, even if you do live through that, you will never be the same after that, right? People have had life-altering changes with far less violence than that. And the knowledge thinking that it was done to you because of an urban legend that could possibly now be true. Because there's evidence now that these girls were working for somebody and they don't know who that was. Now, it could have been another human posing as Slender Man that just brainwashed them. That is a very possible part to this story, but no one knows. There's been sightings of Slender Man. There's been almost like evidence left in a forest that would say maybe this guy did exist. Who knows? It's a mystery, and it's creepy. It's something that definitely keeps you up at night. But here we are at the end of the video. Please be careful if you go into any forests, because people have said they've seen eyes staring back at them. They've seen hands come around trees. They've seen people in the distance walking through. Be very careful, because a forest is nothing but a labyrinth of unknown. And trust me, sometimes not knowing something may be a lot better than knowing something. Well, like I said, please go check out the Confused Army merch and the David Confused merch in the store section of this channel. Leave a ghost story in the description below and you can end up in our next video. Who knows? But I'm Dave, still confused, and at least our dogs aren't werewolves.